This video contains major spoilers for Pokémon Legends ZA. If that's something that doesn't bother you, then I hope you enjoy this video and watch it until the very end. Towards the end of the game, one of my favorite characters, Naveen, says a quote that genuinely stuck with me until now as I am recording this video. I appreciate that AZ is trying to right his wrongs, and I owe him as much as any of us do. I don't want to be the bad guy anymore than the rest of you, but accountability matters. And Naveen is correct. Accountability matters, and that is something that a lot of games get absolutely wrong when they're trying to make us, the players, feel empathy towards someone who has only committed the worst of sins. Then I shall tell you of the terrible sins I have committed and of my regrets. Hi, I'm Muffs, welcome to the Muffs ART-CHIVE, and today I'll talk about the beautiful tragedy of AZ and Legends ZA's story. AZ was introduced in the Pokémon XY games released in 2013. As a mysterious, obscure and tall figure that meets the player a few times throughout the game, before a final battle against him right after we became the champion of the Kalos region. After this battle, a peculiar Floette is sent down from the sky, and we are told that it was AZ's partner, who he hadn't seen in thousands of years. Back then, I was 7 years old, and I was so intrigued by AZ's character and his Floette, but I didn't really think much of it until now, that I grew up and came to be really invested in the lore behind the Pokémon games and franchise. So to me, it was a huge surprise to see that the untold story of AZ would make its return in Pokémon Legends ZA, and that, oh well, I was pleasantly surprised by how much it touched me. AZ is not a good person. He built the ultimate weapon and became the bearer of destruction itself, killing everything but himself to end a long-lasting war that had also previously killed his partner Floette. But there's an even darker twist to this. The many lives he took, the massacre he commanded was used to bring back his Floette, who was not only his last memory and a gift from his late mother, but a Pokémon that is now stuck in its middle stage evolution, or so we thought, because we discovered that this Floette has a mega evolution throughout Pokémon Legends ZA. It is also important to mention that AZ became an immortal human after he used the ultimate weapon, so he's around 3000 years old during Legends ZA. Right off the bat, we see, as we start playing Legends ZA, that Lumiose City's Prism Tower is charged with some sort of uncontrollable power, an energy that we eventually know to be the primary cause of the rogue mega evolutions, and as AZ confesses his terrible sins to the player before the showdown against the Prism Tower, we are told that years after the ultimate weapon he created Angie. Ange? I don't really know how to pronounce this, to be honest. By request of an unknown man who wanted his help to protect the Kalos region. Angie is what we could call AZ's second ultimate weapon, but this one can only be used by a trainer capable of leading his Floettes to it, and handling the immense power it holds when Mega evolved. So AZ is still alive throughout Legends ZA, and his Floette has been with him since the XY games. What exactly is stopping AZ from going to Angie and stopping it himself? Stopping it from creating the rogue Mega evolutions? Well, it's the fact that AZ's human body is dying. After 3000 years, it seems likely that AZ has reached an age that disabled him from being a powerful Pokémon trainer, and from just living comfortably. He then establishes Hotel Z to be his final destination, his resting place. But you know what makes the story even more tragic? Lysander. The presence of Lysander as one of our main characters, if that's how I could put it. The leader of Team Flare in the XY games is alive and returning as a man called L, who lost most of his memories and now resembles AZ in many different ways, ignoring the obvious, which is the white hair. L and AZ are very similar, both have flawed worldviews, with violent tendencies, they wanted to or carried out massacres powered by powerful Pokémon and weapons, and both are now immortal human beings. And by immortal, I mean that they probably only die of age. That's me just making an assumption. Lysander survived at the end of Pokémon XY, and just like AZ, became an immortal human being after attempting to use a rebuilt version of the ultimate weapon, and this makes him mirror AZ's life in a way. What makes it better or worse, depending on your perspective, is that it is also sad during the XY games that L, Lysander, is AZ's very distant relative. He's a descendant of AZ's brother. And my only real complaint with the story of Legends ZA is that they didn't really elaborate on this, and they didn't actually bring back this point that they mentioned during the XY games. But oh well, going back to what I was saying, the accountability matters phrase I quoted from Naveen at the start is also applied to Lysander, who was previously a villain who wanted to wipe out everyone who disagreed with him using the weapon one of his ancestors built. And suddenly, he's back to the Pokemon games, but as a man who believes in doing good, that enlightens the player about the truth behind what is happening in Lumio City, and who was chosen by Zygarde itself to atone for his actions and redeem himself. But none of that erases his actions. It doesn't mean that everyone he affected during the XY games has to forgive him or ignore the atrocities he committed. He's still a man who has to pay for his actions, and even though you could argue that this comeback as a good guy wouldn't have happened if he hadn't lost his memory, I just simply mean that throughout this game, and in the Pokemon world in general, those who walk down wicked paths have a chance at atoning for their sins, carrying the weight of their actions until their very last breath, being held accountable by all and everyone that surrounds them. She likely also returned to me so that I could atone for my sins by stopping the tower. AZ says this phrase while telling the truth to the player and Team MZ. He's mentioning Floette, another quote that honestly stuck with me until this moment, because it made me realize that the story of this game is mature, in a way that is easy to comprehend and follow. Mature because those who hurt the people of Lumiose will never be forgotten nor forgiven, because both AZ and Lysander, as distant family members, walk down similar paths, were flawed in every single way possible and still pay for what they did. They are destined to spend hundreds of years, if not thousands in AZ's case, being reminded of what they did and atoning for their sins until they reach their grave. And that is accountability. That is why accountability matters, and that is why Legend ZA's story was so incredible to me. That's why it was so beautifully tragic to see AZ's words come true at the end of the main story. Floette was waiting for him to find a way to stop Angie, the Prism Tower, and only then would she, and all of Lumiose, let him rest. Remember him with respect, but never forget what he truly did. And now Lysander, as Zygarde's chosen one, must do the same. AZ's death made me pretty emotional. Very emotional. I genuinely cried. It felt like my 7-year-old me finally got the closure she wanted to see for AZ, the wicked and mysterious man that terrified her during the XY games, and that Lysander, who is still one of my favorite characters to this day, can try to earn that same respect someday. So, to end this video once again, I'll say it. Accountability matters, and an incredible story knows how to tackle this. That is why I loved Legend ZA's story, and how AZ lived a beautifully tragic story. I'd also like to point out that I do think Grisham and Grisel are very hypocritical in the way that they blindly defend Lysander. I mean, they were Team Flare members, so I get why they're so blinded by Lysander's flawed worldviews, but as I was saying, I do think it's very hypocritical of them to criticize AZ and then blindly defend Lysander, since both basically had not the same mission, but they were trying to use the same weapon, and they kind of had similar effects on Lumiose City. So the inclusion of Grisham and Grisel in the story brings out some of the hypocrisy that some characters have when tackling and talking about, again, AZ and Lysander. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that this game's story was just a glimpse on how intriguing the next Pokemon games will be. Before I finish this video, I just wanted to mention that I did an in-depth review of the game. It was my last video, mentioning the parts that I didn't like regarding the graphic, but in that video I mentioned that my favorite part of Legend ZA was the story, so I really wanted to do a video talking about how much I think accountability is an essential part of making a good story that can redeem in some way its villains or just people who committed atrocities. I feel like sometimes the Pokemon games make villains who are a bit too shallow. When I say shallow, I mean that they kind of just have some evil motive and go with it until the end, but you don't really see why they're gonna do it until the very end, and then suddenly they're wiped out of the story from one moment to another, and you're kind of just meant to forget them and not really think about them. But they're also trying to tell you that they were important for the story, but you don't really see it in a lot of Pokemon games, and I think that the XY games were the original XY games did this beautifully by including Lysander in the story, and then AZ's character as such a mysterious guy who was thousands of years old. And Legend ZA, even though it had a lot of issues regarding graphics, whatever, it has a bunch of controversies, we all know it, but the story was well crafted, it was beautiful. I really liked it, and it was honestly what could have saved the game's reputation for a lot of people, I feel like. And to me personally, it was my favorite part of the game. Thank you so much once again for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.